Hello, welcome. Just give it a few moments while people trickle in. Welcome, everybody. Just giving it some time here. We'll get started in just a moment. All right, well, it looks like attendance is leveling off a little bit, so I'm going to get started. Welcome to our National Planning and Assessment Program informational session. My name is Greg Stewart. I'm the Education Program Manager at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts, or CCAHA, and I use they and he pronouns. For accessibility's sake, I will say that I'm a white person with glasses and headphones, and I'm wearing a lavender top, and I have a blurred background behind me. Um, so a little bit more about this webinar. So today's webinar is an informal information session about our National Endowment for the Humanities funded Collections Care Capacity Building Program, which we hope you are all considering for your institution. We're going to share some frequently asked questions and some basic tips about the application process and potential project scopes. And I'm joined by our three specialists who will be undertaking the planning, assessment, and training projects for the most part. So you'll have the opportunity to ask them questions directly. And before we get started, just some Zoom housekeeping. You are in Zoom webinar, so your video and audio are turned off, but you can ask questions or make comments to us in the chat. Our program is auto closed captioned in English, and you can turn on subtitles with the little CC button in the Zoom toolbar. So we're going to have some very brief, kind of informal presentations on the resources we've put together, including our FAQ, and then we will follow that with Q&A with you. But please feel free to ask questions anytime during the program. So we're recording this program, which we'll send out to everybody, and we'll send this PowerPoint out and the resources for application in a follow-up email. And of course, big thanks to the NEH for supporting this project and for supporting our program today. So one quick note about the organization that we work for, the CCAHA. We are a regional conservation lab and preservation services facility. We're based in Philadelphia, but we work with organizations and clients all across the country. Our conservators treat paper-based objects like books, photographs, documents, artwork on paper, and more. And we're all in the preservation services staff, and we're the ones who work in the field, providing educational programs like this one and helping institutions plan for the future of their collections. The center also offers a wide range of digitization services, as well as fundraising assistance, housing, framing, and more. And you can learn more about us and what we do at our website, ccha.org. So just wanted to go around and just really quickly introduce everybody who's on this call. You already know me, but if we're going in alphabetical order, I think that would be Dyani would be first up. I just want to say hi to everybody.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us, whether you are live or watching this recording. My name is Dyani Feige. I use she and her pronouns, and I am the Director of Preservation Services at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. I am going to be telling you more about kind of the program overview, some of the guidelines, and everything in just a moment. As a point of visual access, I am a white woman with short-ish, curly, gray, brown hair. I'm wearing glasses and a blue and white blouse. And I think I will pass it on to my coworker, Katie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Deani. I'm Katie Lau. My pronouns are she and her. For accessibility purposes, I am a white woman with dark brown hair that's up in a bun and a gray shirt, and my background is blurred. like I said, I'm a preservation specialist here at the Conservation Center, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about space assessments and collection storage plans when we get to that point. And I will pass along to Caitlin.
Unmute myself. Sorry about that. I am Caitlin Pettengill. I am the Digital Archive Specialist at the Center. I use she, her pronouns. For accessibility, I am a white woman with blonde curly hair, and there's a window behind me with a quite strong sunlight. I am going to be talking more about the digital preservation and digitization planning aspects of the program.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Dyani can share hers, and she's just going to kind of walk you through our program guide a little bit here.
Yes, so bear with me for 1 second. It is a PDF, and there's not a super great way to just automatically get to it. So let me make it full screen if I can. Of course, I had it working 2 seconds ago. You can see
I
it.
think it's if you just go, you were almost there, Dyani.
The Zoom was blocking the bottom of my.
There's full screen mode.
Oh, okay.
Right under read mode.
Let's see if I can make that. Oh my goodness.
It's okay.
You all can handle seeing the tools in my Adobe.
You did say this was an informal session, so
yes.
we're keeping with that.
All right, yeah. So I am going to just kind of walk through, like I said, some of the overall program itself, and then some of the guidelines around this. This is work that we have been doing for many years at the Conservation Center. As Greg mentioned, for many of those years, it has also been funded either in part or in very large part by the National Endowment for the Humanities. And this is continuing on in that vein, which is really wonderful. We're very fortunate to have that funding. But this is the first time that we've done this work in quite this way. So we wanted to just share a little bit more from the jump, and as Greg mentioned, have this opportunity for you all to ask questions if there is anything that is not clear. If you are with us live, of course, we encourage you to ask questions this afternoon. If you are watching this in the future, the recording, we will be sharing our emails, and our emails are on the website as well. And so definitely highly encourage folks to reach out with questions, concerns, problems, anything. So as just a big logistical overview, applications are now open and available. You can click through to our website and access applications right now. Applications will be open through May. So everything is due on June 1st. So if you're accessing this earlier in the month, you have plenty of time. I know that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about in the FAQ, is just kind of how much time we anticipate this would take. But just for overall housekeeping, basically applications are open for the month of May, and we will be gladly receiving questions and concerns throughout that entire time as well. So how is this, what are the kind of the purposes of this program, and how is it a little different from some of the ways that we've worked with organizations in the past? As Greg also mentioned, our team and preservation services, we are really the folks at the Conservation Center who are most frequently working directly with organizations to help them identify and then address some of their collections care and management needs. One of the primary ways that we do this with organizations is through what really looks like consultation work. So meeting with stakeholders and constituents who work with collections at collecting organizations to assess some of their preservation and collections management needs, and then help them put strategies into place to try to address some of those needs. How this is a little bit different from some of the work that we've done in the past is in the most straightforward model of this, our specialists would go on site, work with an organization, get a lot of information, and then turn around a report that offers observations, reflections, resources, and recommendations. And that could be the end of the engagement, right? So it's a useful, productive day and conversation back and forth around this particular engagement, but it ends with a report, and the report, unfortunately, could sit on the shelf. So we wanted to try to put together a structure for this work so that we could not only kind of dip in at one point in an organization's preservation collections management journey, but try to work with them over time to identify and address some of those needs. So one of the biggest differences from between this program and previous iterations is that organizations have the opportunity to apply for more than one engagement and project with the Conservation Center. So these are, and I'll tell you a little bit more about just kind of the nuts and bolts of that in a moment, but just to give an overview on what types of projects are part of this, and then Katie, Caitlin, and I will each be describing in a little bit more detail the types of the work that each of us will be working on. So basically, the program is broken into consulting projects and training projects. So organizations are able to apply to work with us on an assessment, planning, or kind of very direct hands-on consultation project, and or to have us come out and do some targeted, either on-site or virtual as relevant, we'll get to that more in a moment, training on particular topics. So within the consulting projects, we have the main types of consulting projects are either having an assessment done or working with one of our specialists on policy and planning development. So in an assessment, that is kind of the very straightforward, as I mentioned before, it's a reflection of a place in time of an organization's kind of resources, capacities, and needs, reflected in a written report that you can then take and use to leverage future funding. You can use it as an advocacy tool to try to convince your coworkers and administration and other relevant stakeholders that investing in collections care and management is important. But it really is just kind of a one point in time written report about a particular topic area. The policy and planning development area is getting a little bit further in some of that kind of ongoing engagement. So in this area of the project, one of our specialists will work with a site on developing either a relevant collections related policy. So this might look like collections management policies, collections development policies, etc., or taking something like a preservation needs assessment that has been done previously and kind of mapping it strategically onto a preservation plan. So it's not just that kind of one directional, we've made the observations and we're giving you recommendations. There's a couple rounds of drafts. We're going back and forth to determine that if we are suggesting planning in a certain time frame, that we're all kind of in agreement that that would be feasible for your organization. We're incorporating kind of more practical functional considerations like resources, and in some cases, we're even helping sites come up with budgets with sample supplies, equipment, furniture, etc. So the policy planning project, like I said, it's kind of going a little bit further than the assessment in that it's meant to result in a guiding framework that you could use to really, in a really practical, functional way, further your preservation goals. And then finally, the training. This one is pretty self-explanatory. This, as I mentioned, one of our specialists would go. We have a whole list of topics that you can select from for training purposes. So one of our specialists would go to your site or virtually if the topic would enable that, and work directly with your team. And if you are interested, you can invite folks from other organizations, either in the area or if you are part of a network of organizations. That piece is kind of up to you. And but really, we're doing kind of very targeted custom training on a particular range of preservation and collections management related topics. So how this actually looks in terms of what you are asked to do within the application, the project is broken out into what we call tracks. So topic tracks that kind of in a pretty broad way, what is included in one track are all projects and types of work that are along the same general theme of kind of level of resources and capacity, level of previous investment in and knowledge about preservation, collections care, collections management needs and issues, or very specific, very topical tracks like there is a track about space assessment and collections storage planning. So that one obviously is very specific to the area of need within your organization. So now I guess we can just well, I'll come back to the descriptions of the particular projects that are encompassed within this. And I will actually just, because each of us can kind of describe the ones that we will primarily be working on. And I'm just going to actually skip ahead and talk about the process for the application itself. So bear with me for 1 second while I scroll. So for if you are selecting within a given track, we have identified a few sample kind of courses of progression that it might be relevant or just helpful to see how we might recommend laying out kind of a course of action for applicants. So within the application process itself, you will be asked to select. You only have to select one, but you can select one or several projects within that track. The applications themselves are it's a pretty light lift. It does take a bit of time investment, but it's nothing at all approaching kind of the level of the NEH applications themselves, which we are so grateful for their funding and resources, but their applications are not always simple. These, we have really tried to work to make the applications themselves as simple as possible. So you select the track in which you are applying, you select one or several projects within that track. And then we have assembled a panel of, we're calling it an advisory panel of individuals representing all different types of collecting organizations throughout the field and throughout the country. So we're trying to, our goal in assembling this panel was to try to get as wide a cross-section of circumstances, types of organizations, et cetera, as possible, just to kind of make sure that we're not, I mean, we are all physically based in the Philadelphia area. We have our various levels of experience and background, but we wanted to make sure that we're really opening this project up to, for example, folks on the West Coast and folks from very, very small, quote unquote, non-traditional collecting organizations. So our advisory panel has representatives from a lot of different types of, like I said, both regions and collecting organization types to try to ensure a broader view of the field. And each of the advisory panel members will be reviewing a certain number of applications and then working together to kind of score those based on rubrics that we have developed. And then we will all meet together to ultimately select the projects that you'll be working on. The reason that I mention this right now is because there is a world in which you are not accepted for the exact project or combination of projects that you applied for. But in that case, we would, because the advisory panel thinks that maybe your exact range of circumstances or your level of resources, et cetera, would just fit better with one particular project than another. In those cases, we will absolutely come back to you as soon as possible and work with you to make sure that that actually would be of interest. You know, we're certainly not going to force anyone into a situation that is not something that you actually want for your organization. But it's the goal of this is really to ensure that the work that we're doing is the best fit for the organizations who are applying, and therefore will have the most kind of benefit and impact on your organization's collections futures. So I think now I am going to go back and describe the particular projects that are encompassed within this. And I will just, I'm going to do the first few and then pass it on to my colleagues, the specialists who are primary points of contact for these other projects as well. And then we can look quickly. I can revisit that last page, which is laying out some potential roadmaps for what an overall project package might look like. And then Greg will spur the Q&A period with some of the frequently asked questions. But just to jump right in the preservation, collections management related sphere, the first track is called foundational planning. And this is, it's at organizations or collections at a couple of different levels depending on the circumstances. This would be the track to look into if your organization or collection has really never done almost any collections care planning or real strategy or anything. This is it's focused on guiding frameworks that will help you set off on a course toward preservation action and working with your collection into the future. So if you're in an organization that has been you've had preservation plans before, you're working with specialists in the area on a regular basis, you're probably a little bit at a different stage than this. But if, for example, you are a all volunteer organization that doesn't really have any written policies and plans in place, or maybe you have some written policy in place, but it's been a very long time since they've been revisited, I might recommend applying for the foundational planning track. As this description here says, it addresses the development and or refinement of core documents and policies, as well as setting organizations off onto a path to continue addressing preservation issues in the future. So within this, the assessment is called Foundational Planning Assistance. This is really, I would say, I said earlier, the assessments are a little bit more unidirectional as far as an assessor coming in and then providing a report. This is an exception to that. This is very much a conversation. The assessor will do basically a SWOT analysis of your organization, but focused on collections, and then put together a plan, even though it's called an assessment in this purpose, but put together a plan for moving forward. Policy areas within this track are really those guiding foundational policies like collections management policies, collections development policies, and we included an exhibition policy in here as well, just because preservation and exhibition really do go so closely hand in hand. The next track, and this is kind of the most, in some ways, the most conventional of our tracks, is where an assessor could work with you on a preservation needs assessment and or a preservation plan. The preservation needs assessment is really a big picture look at anything and everything that impacts collections care. So in this case, the assessor would spend a day on site. They would talk about what resources do you have in place to work with collections, what are your environmental situations within the building, what are concerns that you have about space allocation in a kind of more general way. How are you handling collections and caring for them on down to the more granular, how are objects actually sitting on the shelf? So this is really, if you're not quite just getting started and want to have a very broad look at a lot of things that touch on collections care and management, this is very much where we would recommend starting. The planning portion of that is, of course, the preservation plan, and in that we would take essentially findings and recommendations from a preservation needs assessment and work together to map them onto a strategic plan for collections care. Organizations are able to apply to have us work on a preservation plan with you, even if we didn't work together on the preservation needs assessment, if you do have some form of written assessment documentation in place. So that is to say, we wouldn't have to start with the preservation needs assessment on our end, but you do have to have something in place there in order to work together on the plan. And then the final one that I am going to talk about is the emergency preparedness track. As it sounds like, it's really some of the subject matter is going to be very similar to what we would cover in that preservation overview track, but it's looking at it from a slightly different angle. So it's looking at anything and everything that impacts collections and what risk might that be causing and what strategies might we be able to put into place to mitigate those risks. So the assessment portion of this would be a risk assessment. This is a really great tool for either getting started with or moving forward on an emergency preparedness and response effort at a site, because we are looking at all of these different factors that impact collections, but we're also giving them ratings as far as likelihood of this risk occurring, and then the impact that the risk occurring could have on collections, and then also suggesting mitigation strategies and giving feasibility and impact ratings on those mitigation strategies as well. Then, of course, the plan that's involved there is the emergency preparedness and response plan, in which we would work together to help you draft a comprehensive emergency plan for your site. This is another one where it's a challenge to develop an emergency plan without having had some facet of risk assessment done previously, but it doesn't have to have been us. Even if it was just kind of an internal, as long as your organization really understands your risks, we would be able to jump right into the emergency planning stage of things there. Right, I'm going to turn it over to Katie to tell you a little bit more about space-related assessments and plans.
Thanks, Dyani. So as Dyani kind of mentioned previously, most of our kind of standard preservation needs assessment does consider space at a really generalized level. But this is the first time that we're offering a suite of services or a service that is specifically focused on planning for preservation safe and efficient space. While it's a new service here in our NEH offering, it is something that we have been doing for about a year and a half, and it was in development previous to that. So there's been a lot of thought and practice and planning going into the implementation of this. A good way to think about the space assessment, if we were to kind of start there, is to think about your space assessment is to a space plan as a preservation needs assessment is to a preservation plan. So it exists to help you plan for the long-term preservation safe storage of your collections. And preservation safe means a lot of things. It means what kinds of furniture and storage materials you're using, how you are setting your collections up on those pieces of furniture or within your storage in a way that is protective, making the most efficient use of the space that you either have or are planning for. And of course, making sure that the layout of that space is in alignment with your day-to-day workflows, that it's realistic for how you're assessing and accessing and using the collection. And then perhaps most importantly, of course, any planning is going to have to account for future growth. So any space assessment takes into consideration your rate of growth, what you're planning on collecting, whether you're planning on collecting at all, that kind of thing. So really, if you go this track, you're mostly focused on navigating something like reorganization, making sense of what you have, and planning for long-term care. The basis of this is a lot of conversations. This is a very, very specific, customized to your needs service, as well as measurements taken during a site visit, both of the way that your storage is currently configured and also the actual literal size of your collection. The end product of a space assessment is a suite of customized floor plans at different levels of physical and financial intervention, either on a budget set by you or with the idea that you use what I'm recommending to create a budget. It's really important to understand that this is a super modifiable service. It's appropriate for people who are on one end of the spectrum, maybe looking to reorganize and reuse what they already have in the space that they already have, all the way up to a new build where we're coming in kind of at the ground level with you to make sure that that new space is fully customized with your specific needs in mind. If you were to continue working with us on a plan in response to the space assessment, that could either look like a collection storage plan, or an environmental monitoring plan. One thing that we consider in all of our assessments, but particularly the P&A and the space assessment is, to what extent is your environment working for you? And what are ways in which you may need to responsibly monitor that environment moving forward? A person who recently did a space assessment with us came back and told us that the service really gave them a brighter future for their collection. And that's the hope, is that it can help you look at something that may feel really overwhelming and confusing and just spatially a little too much, and make you feel like you can handle it. You do have a direction to move forward. And that's it. I'll move on to Caitlin.
All right. Thank you, Katie. So I will be covering digital collections, which is an area that people are continually asking about. They're trying to come up with a more strategic way to tackle digital collections. And this includes both digitizing physical collections and making those digital surrogates available, and what we call born digital, which is things that have never existed outside of a computer, things like spreadsheets, emails, PDFs. And it can be a difficult thing to get started on. So the digital preservation assessment assesses where you currently are, how you've been handling digitizing collections, what sort of files you're creating, the metadata you're creating, how you're backing those up, and how you are making them accessible to your users. So it's a kind of snapshot of where you are currently with some recommendations for how to achieve your future goals. The digitization plan is a plan to digitize your collections. We like to focus on a pilot collection and work together step by step to digitize that collection, and then create a kind of scalable framework for you to go on and digitize more of your collection in the future, responding to what you learned during that pilot plan. And then the training there is going to cover some traditional collections care and also things that are specific to digital collections, such as processing your born digital collections. If you have floppy disks, if you have CDs, if you have old thumb drives, how do you go about processing those collections? How do you take in born digital material from donors? A lot of people who are donating photograph collections these days, there might be some digital photographs. How is that processing different from traditional collections? So we focus on that in the training. And CMS or DAMS optimization, that's collections management software or digital asset management software. How do you choose one? How do you make it work the best for you and your collections and your staff? And then preparing and handling documents for digitization, the physical digitizing of collections, and creating images that will work well for you. I think that's it. Pass back to Greg.
Yeah, so we probably don't have time to go through all of the training projects, but do you want to just maybe explain briefly kind of what it would look like because the training fits in a little bit differently from the consultation and assessment projects?
Yes. So if you are working with us on the training projects, and we can talk about this a little in more detail when we get to the FAQ, but if you were just looking for training, in this case, you would probably start with me, and we can talk through kind of what your needs are for your staff, what are your needs are for their institution, what kind of things are you looking to learn from us. And I can kind of talk you through the menu of options that we would have through this grant-funded program. And I think it's all trainings that are related to the 5 program tracks. But if you are just doing a training project that doesn't have one of those specific tracks, you can really pick and choose up to 2 from anywhere. And we can definitely work with you to figure out what's best. And then from there, it's just about kind of working on scheduling it and staffing it. And we're trying to make sure we have a bunch of different trainings that we offer in different capacities, but we're trying to standardize these a little bit for approximately half-day sessions. And typically these are meant to be in person because a lot of times we do have some hands-on content or tabletop exercises, but there are a number of things that can be kind of adapted for online content too. So that's a little bit more about the training projects.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, I think just to say, I feel like I might have kind of glossed over this, but just to say, you can apply for applicants can apply for one or two projects overall. It could be two planning or like one assessment and one planning project. It could be one assessment project and one training opportunity, or it could be two training opportunities. So this program guideline that I'm sharing currently, this is available with the application on the website, and it spells out all of that out a little more clearly there. I am going to go back to this the sample kind of roadmap of ways that you could approach this, and just to kind of reiterate, so there's a sample here of a site who applied for an assessment and a related training project, a plan and a related training project, or just two training projects. You don't have to, it could be just an assessment and a plan. There doesn't have to be a training project involved. But yeah, I think that's kind of should we shift to the kind of prepared FAQ and have that be a launch pad into the question period? You are more than welcome, participants are more than welcome to kind of drop questions in the chat as you have them. We may cover them in this FAQ period.
So you're seeing my FAQ, the
Yes.
slide. Yes. Okay, good. Yeah, so I think we can just kind of go through these questions. So first off, how much time does it take to fill out this application?
Well, as I suggested earlier, it's neither a super heavy lift nor a just toss it off in 15 minutes application. You are absolutely welcome to download and click through the application just to see it. If you want to get a sense before you even enter any text in. There are a number of just kind of questions about the site and your collections, just kind of informational questions. And then for each, the different tracks vary a little bit, but each of them have, I would say, I think about 4 slightly longer narrative questions. We're not looking for pages of material here. We're looking for a paragraph. So yeah, I would say don't leave it until the absolute last minute, but I would also say that if you are watching this later, or if you're not able to kind of get administrative buy-in until a week before the due date, it is possible to turn around an application in a few days, I would say. Hard to estimate exact time commitment on the minutes or hours level, but and another thing there that isn't really reflected in the FAQ, but if you have questions about the application, we are more than happy to hear and field those questions at any point. As I've mentioned a couple of times, the structure of this is a little bit new for us, so we've tried to cover all of our bases, but it's possible that there are still some pieces that are not as clear as they could be. So please just let us know.
Speaking of time, what would you generally suggest as the time commitment for a project with us?
So the policies and plans that kind of on the charts, they were the middle column there. Those are going to have the greatest time commitment from the site, just because you do have to have that level of a little bit of back and forth. Again, the reason for that back and forth is to make sure that the documents are as effective and productive as possible for you. So by investing a little bit more time into it, hopefully that would help the overall process just be that much more impactful. For the assessments, there is a pre-visit questionnaire that is fairly lengthy, and then there is the 1 day on site. But other than that, the assessments, there's not a huge amount of back and forth. I mean, of course, absolutely, there's editing and digestion time after the assessor sends the report along, and if there are questions or other things you're looking for, that might be a bit of a time investment, but that's not going to be a really lengthy time investment. I would say just as far as the projects themselves, the training is going to be the project with the least ongoing time investment for the site, because it really is the assessor or the trainer arrives and you work through the training program, and that's the engagement. So yeah, I would say that it's a range, with the plans and policies being kind of the greatest time investment, but not, I would hope it's not overwhelming. It's just maybe carving out a few hours a month for a period of time while that back and forth is happening.
Okay, thank you. And then just kind of going back to the application, why do I need to submit all these attachments? What is the purpose of the attachment section?
It's really just, I mean, there are some very practical, we are only able to work with certain types of nonprofit organizations through this grant funding. But moreover, I think the attachments are just, it's meant to tell us more and tell the advisory panel more about your collection and organization. And if you have the resources that are requested as part of the application, that will only help us have a better sense of your situation and your needs, and be able to work with you better to put together a project that really is going to be the most suitable. If the application asks for example, policy documents or previous reports, and you don't have them, absolutely don't sweat it. That is not, these are not graded. There's not any sort of penalty or anything. That tells us something about your situation, which is that maybe as an organization, it would be a useful investment to put some time into developing written policies and documentation. So it's not, we're not judging the resources at all, just in the kind of gathering a clearer understanding over your situation.
Does this grant cover operating costs?
So I'm going to answer it this question in a little bit of a slightly different way, and that is by saying that for the vast majority of these projects, there is zero cost at all for the site. All of the assessments, all of the plans, and all of the training opportunities except two are completely free. And that includes, you don't have to pay travel, you don't have to pay, any additional staff time or anything. There are two training programs that have material fees, because there are supplies used that are essentially used up during the training opportunity. And in one of those, you get to take stuff away with you in a building enclosures. So that's kind of an added bonus there. But really what on our end, the grant funds and subsidized is the work that we're doing through these engagements. So it covers the time on site and the planning, the writing and the plan development and all of that. So unfortunately, there is not additional funding for the sites that we're working with, but there's also absolutely no expense except in those two training workshop fees. And we just scrolled very quickly through the training program descriptions, but that is spelled out clearly on the descriptions as well. And I realized I covered the last question as well. So,
so this next question we asked because we get that it's a little confusing since the consulting projects do have training potentially built in. So, what's the difference between the consulting and the training project if they both have training? Be our next question as possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that really anything that includes or is to some extent a consulting project, in those cases, we are really going to be directly assisting your organization with their needs. In the training, it's a little bit more we're giving you information and hopefully you can take that and implement it. But a example would be consulting with an organization in order to help them write a collections management policy versus a training program that's teaching about the importance of and what is kind of entailed within collections management policies. So really, the distinction is just that there is kind of a very direct one-on-one, like actual assistance in providing services in the consulting options.
Yes, and just to reiterate the cost of the institution, totally free, except for, as Dyani mentioned, there might be some supply costs, specifically with the workshop housing solutions where we build 4-flap enclosures and you get to take those with you. And then our mold workshop, we may have to ship some of the supplies depending on travel arrangements and stuff. So we're sort of building that in as a buffer. But either way, it's not going to be a huge cost to you. It's going to be certainly less than 1,000, even probably less than 500. I'm just saying. So pretty low cost, and it's only for those two trainings if you request them. So I think at this point we have a few minutes left if there are questions from the audience.
And I will just reiterate again, if you have really specific questions about your circumstance, or if we don't have a huge amount of time, so if we don't get to them today, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat. You are more than welcome to reach out to me. Our colleague Camilla is the one who can probably help the most with kind of very technical application related questions. So the C. Dawson, that is Camilla's email. Yeah, what questions do folks have for now? While we're waiting, I'll say there will be another round of this. So for us, this is a 2-year grant, and we have the funding until kind of early spring 2028. So there will be a second round about a year from now, in which if you're not able to get an application together now, or if the timing's not right, or if you are not successful in this round, there will be an opportunity for a future round. Can institutions apply for both rounds? You mean now and in a year? Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I'll say if you apply, if you are successful in the first round, I can't say with positivity, but I would say that we might kind of hold aside spots for other organizations that haven't worked on these previously in the second round. That's not a hard and fast rule. It's just we do anticipate getting a lot of applications for these, and so it might be a greater likelihood in the first round if you are successful in the first round, that is. Yeah, of course.
Any other questions?
I'll just say, I think we're having issues on our end with the chat. It's making us, when we type messages, it's sending it just to hosts and panelists. So Dyani and
Oh,
Caitlin, I think your original messages with your emails just went to us. So I just retyped them in to the chat
thank
just
you.
now.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yes,
see.
I had
I
the
see
same
that
thing
now.
happen to me at a webinar last week.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Katie, for picking up on that.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, well, I think if there are no other questions, we're getting close to time, so we can let you go about your day. I just want to thank Katie and Caitlin and Deani for all of your help today, and of course, Camilla Dawson, who's been behind the scenes with all of the tech and everything for today's webinar. Definitely thanks the National Endowment for Humanities and for all of you for showing up today. So our next virtual program is going to be Turning Assessment Recommendations into Action, How to Make Practical Use of Assessment Reports on May 29th at noon. And if you happen to be in the Philly area, our spring house, open house, excuse me, is on May 20th from 5 to 7:30 p.m. So we hope to see you there. Um, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, the May 29th program, I'm realizing if you attended and just made the decision to apply for this right after that, that might be a pretty quick turnaround, but it would be an opportunity to hear directly from organizations that have worked with us on assessments and other kind of planning projects to, either solidify your interest or kind of spark your interest for next year if you haven't applied for this year. But thank you so much,
Thank
everyone.
you.
We really hope to see a number of applications and a number of questions along the way.
Bye, everyone.
All right, thanks.